scripture for today is Luke 19, 1 through 10. Jesus entered Jericho and was passing through. A man was there by the name of Zacchaeus. He was a chief tax collector and was wealthy. He wanted to see who Jesus was, but because he was short, he could not see over the crowd. So he ran ahead and climbed a sycamore fig tree to see him, since Jesus was coming that way. When Jesus reached the spot, he looked up and said to him, "Zacchaeus, come down immediately. I must stay at your house today." So he came down at once and welcomed him gladly. All the people saw this and began to mutter, "He has gone to be with the guest of a sinner." But Zacchaeus stood up and said to the Lord, "Look, Lord, here and now I give half of my possessions to the poor. And if I have cheated anybody out of anything, I will pay back 4 times the amount." Jesus said to him, "Today's salvation has come to this house, because this man too is a son of Abraham. For the Son of Man came to seek and to save the lost." May God richly bless the hearing of his word. Please be seated.
You never know where you might find a saint. Sometimes you have to pluck them right out of the trees. Have you ever been accused of associating with sinners? Maybe not. Or maybe you don't know about it if you have been. That is the kind of thing that tends to be whispered behind your back. Actually, I hope you have been associating with sinners, because that's just what Jesus calls us to do. Of course, it all comes down to who you consider to be sinners. In Jesus' time, it was a little easier. There were categories that were just automatically considered to be filled with sinners. Sex workers, of course, regardless of their situation. The lame and disabled, generally, because it was thought that their disability was punishment for sin. And tax collectors, because they worked for the Roman government. It didn't matter whether or not they did their work with integrity, and some did. If they were tax collectors, they were sinners. One such tax collector was a man named Zacchaeus. There's much we don't know about Zacchaeus, but we do know that he was short in stature, and we know that he was at least curious about Jesus. We don't know whether or not he cheated people as many tax collectors did. In that time, the way that tax collectors got rich was to keep as much of what they collected as they could get away with. And of course, if they collected more, they could keep more. We do know that something Zacchaeus heard about Jesus appealed to him, made him want to see, made him risk embarrassment by climbing a tree like a little kid. I like him for that. Maybe he was a sinner. Certainly he was lost. But he was ready for his heart to be open to God. He was ready to be a saint. How many people around us are spiritually lost? How many are sinners? I'm not willing to say that all tax collectors are automatically big sinners. But it's certainly true that anyone who feels judged by God and by his or her neighbors is going to be separated from God, and that's the very definition of sin. Sin is often when we do something that we think is unacceptable to God, so we turn away. It's like running away from home after trampling on Mom's marigolds. We can't bear the thought of how disappointed our parents must be in us, or how angry they might be. So we become belligerent, or we turn away. Sin is like that, separating separation from God that springs not only from what we do, but from how we ourselves perceive what we've done. When Adam and Eve ate the apple, what was the first thing they did? They hid from God. Yes, there would be consequences, but the biggest consequence was the separation from God that they themselves initiated. We've been suffering from it ever since. Society considered Zacchaeus to be a sinner, and it's clear that Zacchaeus himself accepted that designation. He felt separated from God and from the right living community, though he did have friends among his fellow sinners. It would never have occurred to him to invite a righteous teacher like Jesus to dinner. It simply was not done. But Jesus took care of that. Jesus invited himself. He called Zacchaeus by name, something respectable Jews probably didn't do very often, and said, "Zacchaeus, hurry and come down, for I must stay at your house today." And he said it in public. Those who heard him started to grumble. Grumbling is usually done in an undertone, not really out loud. That doesn't mean Jesus didn't hear it, though I'm sure he did. Jesus had a mission. He wasn't there to please the crowds. He was there to seek out and save the lost. And the first step, here the only step needed, was to associate himself with the lost one. We know that because Zacchaeus hurried down and was happy to welcome him. Then, without even having a conversation with Jesus as far as we know, Zacchaeus made a decision. "Look, half of my possessions, Lord, I will give to the poor. And if I have defrauded anyone of anything, I will pay back 4 times as much." He declared it in public. This statement gives us some more insight into Zacchaeus' life. He had possessions, not necessarily extravagant possessions, but enough that he could do without half of them. And he probably had not defrauded too many people, or he wouldn't have been able to pay back 4-fold. Jesus believed him. He declared, "Today salvation has come to this house, because he too is a son of Abraham. For the Son of Man came to seek out and save the lost." Jesus declared him restored to favor, an equal son of Abraham, equal to those other Israelites who were not tax collectors or, quote, sinners. He restored Zacchaeus to God's favor. He didn't do it because of Zacchaeus' actions. He did it because those actions showed that Zacchaeus had opened his heart again to God. Remember, sin is separation from God. Have you heard this? If you feel God is far away, guess who moved? It wasn't God. We are the ones who allow ourselves to become distanced by sin. We're the ones who run away or reject God. Where do we see Zacchaeus today? Who are those who don't come to church because they believe they won't be welcomed or treated as equals? Who are those who have succeeded in the world at the cost of their relationship with God? Who are those who have been crushed by the injustices of the world and so believe that God no longer cares? It's our job to reach out to them the way Jesus reached out to Zacchaeus. It's not an easy thing, but notice that Jesus didn't invite Zacchaeus to the temple. He didn't ask Zacchaeus to come here and preach. He simply treated him like an equal. Maybe we get things turned around when we're too focused on getting people to come to church. Maybe what we need to do is to go to people and treat them like equals. I've often wondered how we could do that and be known to be acting on behalf of the church. What about when we do acts of mercy, wearing a button that says, "Ask me about my church"? Would you do it? Would you be proud enough of this church to invite questions? Would you be blessed to admit you're associated with it? Or what about a button that simply says, "East Columbus United Methodist Church, welcome"? Would you wear that during the week? And if not, why not? It bears thinking about. The primary purpose of the church is not worship. Seriously, it's not. The primary purpose of the church is to be the hands and feet of Christ in the world. We're to take the role of Jesus toward all the Zacchaeuses out there, all the people who think they're not good enough for fellowship with God, or who think we think they're not good enough to be with us. We're to make disciples of Jesus Christ, because when people are disciples of Christ, they are reconciled to God. They don't have to live with sin and separation. They can live with God and with love. That's what we want for every person in the world, to live with God and with love. That's how we transform the world. Zacchaeus was a tax collector. He thought he was a sinner, and that belief separated him from God. The world is becoming more secular, more separated from God. The attitude seems to be, yeah, but what has he done for us lately? Or, I've done too many questionable things, there better not be a God. Or people ask, if there's a God, why is the world so messed up? The world is messed up because people live as if there is no God. Let's be like Jesus and be the one who acts as if there is. Let's be like Jesus and call our neighbors by name, saying, Zacchaeus, or Caitlin, or Justin, come down because I must break bread with you today. Let's connect. Let us pray. Dear Holy God, we all feel the separation from you that comes from shame and from sin. But we have Jesus who calls us to come and be equal to those who the Lord blesses. Let us be Jesus for those who don't know him. Let us call our neighbors to fellowship and relationship, both with us and with you. Give us the courage, the means, and the will to welcome all in the name of Christ. Let us be servants and hosts to all those you bring to us. Help us reach out to them and help us connect. In Jesus' holy name we pray. Amen.